Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Joining me today is a near-death experiencer who was taught one thing religiously, but experienced another in her near-death experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you near-death experiencer, Miss Elizabeth Crosby. Elizabeth, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Hi, thank you so much for reaching out and for having me on. I'm really grateful that you're doing this and that you're reaching people like this, because this is just like such an important message, and like not mine specifically, but the message of near-death experiences and of people who have been given this second chance to come back and to say that there is a something, and something that is that I met is not the same as what we're hearing about. I had expected, after 18 years of church, and then just like running away from that I had expected that God was this grumpy white old judge, the long beard and the weird hair, and I thought that I was going to go up to something that was almost like an American courtroom, where I was going to be able to state my defense after I had this list of crimes written off, because I thought that Christian God didn't love me. I thought that Christian God was an asshole. I thought that, because like I was raised Mormon, but I went to a Baptist school, and between them and there, I actually had gone to a few different schools. I went to like a Baptist school and a bunch of different other church sponsored schools, like all of them, for 12 years. And the only thing that they could theologically agree on was that even though God made no mistakes, he sure screwed up with Liz. And I just didn't fit in anywhere. I like somehow at church and at school, I was simultaneously too much of a tomboy and too sexy, and somehow tempting the men to sin. And it's like, I'm not girly enough and too hot. How do these concepts, how do these core concepts, these very juxtaposed things, fit into one? I can't go left and right at the same time, guys.
Well, quite certainly, there's a lot of contradiction in everything mankind does, especially with religion. Now, you spoke to us about growing up in different religions. How did religion affect you prior to your near-death experience?
Well, it was a major point of contention in my home. My mom had converted to Mormonism in college, so this was back in the 1970s. And they had some big Meet the Mormons week, and she was very impressed. And, I guess my dad converted about that time too, over in Tallahassee at FSU. And so, yeah, they fell in love. And there was a bit of contention in the family about that, though, because my grandma was not Mormon and never would be. She was a Methodist. And in the Mormon church, a marriage is only really and truly like super VIP valid if it happens in the temple. Like that's the only way that a marriage can stay together forever. So if it either happens in the temple or if it gets sealed in the temple later, you can kind of do that. But in order to be in there and actually watch the marriage, you have to be a super good Mormon. You have to pay all of your tithing. You have to go pass all of your worthiness interviews. You have to, follow a whole bunch of rules. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs, don't watch R-rated movies, don't sleep in on Sundays, don't go watch a football game on the Sabbath, don't drink coffee, don't drink tea. And I tried. I did a lot of them for a lot of years. I found a lot of loopholes. And what all this church had taught me to be was an excellent little Pharisee. Like the vipers, like when Jesus talks about the Pharisees being vipers, I was on that path. And I was to the point, by high school, I was going through the Old Testament looking for loopholes that would explain why it's okay if I think other girls look soft and smell nice. And it's like, Bible Jesus, if we had talked about him in church, I would have never left. Like, Bible Jesus is very different than church Jesus. Church Jesus and I did not get along, you know? Church Jesus had a bunch of conflicting rules that I couldn't follow, and wanted me to like really submit to my husband. And it felt like in church Jesus, like salvation came from my husband, not my God anyway. And that's just not the way it is. If that's the way your church is teaching it, then they're wrong. The real God isn't like that. And
I understand at some point you actually left Christianity and you left the church and entered into paganism. How did that come about?
Yeah, basically, once I decided that Christian God was evil and that heaven was a horrible place full of rape and torture, then I was going to explore the other faiths.
So with that said, why don't we go into what it was that actually caused your near-death experience to occur?
Yeah. I overdosed. I drank a liter of vodka, and I put over half a bottle of Xanax like out my nose. And before I did it, like somebody had dared me to do it. Your friends, by the way, that you meet at a party that you do drugs with, those are not your friends. But so something even told me, like, this voice that wasn't a voice, it was like a thought I didn't think, and it was peaceful, and it was firm, but it was peaceful. It was almost like if you can imagine Morgan Freeman saying it. And it said, if you do this, you will die. And I went, good. Up my nose it went. And so I started falling backwards, and the room went black. And suddenly I'm in this tunnel, and I'm going towards this light really fast, and I'm going home. I'm finally going home, and I was so happy. And I wasn't in pain anymore, and I was free, and I was going so fast through this tunnel, and I was just like stopped by this big white light. And it goes, are you sure? And I go, yes. And it goes, really? Now? Like this? And that's when it showed me my future. It showed, or not my future, but it showed me how I would have been remembered if I had died. It showed me the future. It showed me like the house that my brother was going to buy 10 years in advance, 10 years later, 5 years later. And yeah, close to 10 years later. And I didn't even believe it. I doubted my own near-death experience until later on. I was sitting at dinner at this house that he had bought, and I recognized the room, and it was the exact room that I had seen in my near-death experience. And him and his wife Katie and like her sisters and all, and they were there. Like, you know, some of the family was there, and they started talking, and I recognized the conversation, and I recognized that this was the conversation that I had seen, except I was still alive, and so it was like different. They did change, but like the tone and where everybody was sitting and the furniture, it was all the same. And Katie changed my brother a lot. Like, this was not my brother as I had experienced him at the time of my near-death experience. Like, he had changed 180 in his life. And so it was like, that was the moment that it hit me, that this was real. Like, I couldn't tell myself it was a dream anymore. I couldn't tell myself that it was the drugs anymore. Like, I had tried to lie to myself, to tell myself that it hadn't happened. And one by one, things that I saw when I died just clicked. And it was like God wanted me to live long enough to see the other side of the chessboard on a lot of things.
Well, let's move on to what you saw after your future vision of your brother buying this house after your funeral or your death. What did you see afterwards?
Well, what I saw that time went backwards, and I saw myself at my job, and I saw myself on stage as a stripper, and God showed me the feelings of the person. It was like a slow day at the club, and showed me like the feelings of one person in particular in the audience. And it showed me.
And I'm sorry, just for context, this is what you did in the past.
Correct. This was many years ago, many years ago. Like at the time, I was working at a strip club. At the time, so it would have been like the present. At the time of my near-death experience. But yeah, I saw myself on stage, and I saw that I was this sickly, shot out, frail, scrawny. I think that was the first time in my life I had ever thought that I didn't look fat. And I finally saw what everybody else had been telling me my whole life with "please God, eat a cheeseburger, woman." And I saw that the men pitied me. They felt bad for me up there. That was uncomfortable, by the way. That was really uncomfortable to find out. And then time went back a little bit further back, and it was going to show me out, the things I was doing after work, like the nightclubs that I was going to just to, fuck around, just to get laid, get high, do all the ecstasy. And that was the point where I got scared, and it was like my little soul went deep. And I thought to myself, oh my God, he's going to send me to hell. I have to go back. I have to repent. And that's when the vision stopped, and the light kind of like laughed, but in this like kind way, like, like when your kid does something kind of ridiculous. It was kind of like that kind of laugh. And it said, just hold on. And then I got really, really scared, like even more scared, because I started thinking about church. And I started thinking specifically about the Mormon repentance process, where I would have to sit in this like little room behind closed doors and like tell every sin, every detail to my bishop. And I couldn't do it. Like the questions in those worthiness interviews, and they really do need to be stopped. They're very graphic and very invasive, and they make the repentance process very public. And God, I'm telling you right now, if your bishop is telling you that God needs to know if you use tongue, that God needs to know if you came, that God needs to know if blah, 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 God already knows. God doesn't need you to tell that to your bishop or your priest. God needs you to understand that when you do something in the shadows, it's going to be brought into the light. You're going to see all those people that you slept with from their side. So you better have tried to treat them well, or you're going to have an uncomfortable and embarrassing experience, just like I did. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. And that doesn't mean that what the church is telling you is right, because they're more wrong. Because when I thought that, that's when God got mad. That was the only time that God got mad, was when I thought about church. And God went, no, just hold on. Just hold on. And that was when I stood. It took me seeing God himself shudder in pain at the thought of what the kids are having to suffer through, with these nasty old men trying to ask them dirty-minded questions, not even realizing that they're being dirty, trying to pass that shit off as holy. That ain't holy. That is a sin. And it is causing God pain. Every time they tell these kids, you're not loved, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. And I'm here to tell you today that God is worthy. God loves you because he is worthy, not because you are worthy. If you do every sin in the world, that's not going to shock him or impress him one little bit. If you do every righteous thing in the world, that's not going to shock him or oppress him one little bit. Because what you're capable of doing and not capable of doing is in his hands, not ours. And all we need to do for things to start going right in our world is to step out of the fucking way. And let the light of Christ shine through us. That unconditional love. If you've been burned so bad at the church that you can't use the name Jesus anymore, just like I couldn't use it for many, many, many years. If it causes you pain, then just use God, because go back into the Bible. Look at how the name that God actually gave us. He didn't give us a name. Moses asked for one, and God just said, no, just tell him I exist.
That's a good translation, by the way. I actually prefer that over I am. I studied the Hebrew text, and actually the name, the phraseology given to Moses better translates to I exist.
Really?
Yes, exactly. So talking about this meeting with God, how did you know it was God? Did you feel it was God? Did God say, I am God? Or what was the way that you determined?
You just know. Like, it was like, I don't know, I guess I'm just using the God term, like, kind of as a summation, but like, or as like a, I have no other word to call it, because it didn't give me titles or nothing. It wanted me to know that it is, that it exists, and that it loves us, and that it was like a summation of all intelligence, all knowledge flowing through, like, and it was made out of love. And it was everything. And it that thing that we're wanting, that we're missing, that's homesickness. And I knew that that was home. And I want to go home so bad. Sometimes I'm just like, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Can I go home now? And the answer is no. And now I'm even like a little bit worried, because like, I think I'm going to be stuck here on earth for a while, because like, I'm starting to see all these things that like I'm supposed to do. And I'm starting to like, feel like I'm remembering the future, and some things I feel almost like God's showing me some things that are about to happen, and that I'm supposed to help some people with, and just to kind of like light those candles and spread that word that the real God is love and nothing else. Oh, no, if you have 2 earrings in your ear, then that means you're a sinner. Oh, if you show your midriff or wear a 2-piece swimsuit, then that means you're a sinner. Oh, no, you have a tattoo, or you dyed your hair purple. Well, I mean, God can't use you. That's a lie. That's a lie from Satan.
What else did you see in this experience after you were shown that God was heavily affected by what's going on with organized religion? Were you shown anything else, or did you come back to your body? And then if you came back to your body, what was that experience like?
One more thing I was shown, after I agreed that I would hold on, there was this dark thing, this shadow attached to me. And it had, I don't like talking about it, because it's like, I can even feel like talking about it, like just the scariness of it. But like when I said, okay, I can hold on, it added, and it was trying to pass itself off as me, but it wasn't me. And it added just a little while longer. Like it was going to try to bring me back there before it was time. And at that point, God was just like done with it, and just kind of like slung me back. And I remember kind of like traveling, or like being like hurtled through this thing, and then suddenly I'm back in my body. And what I find very interesting is that the evil that was attached to me was so determined to pass itself off as me. And I think that that's where a lot of the depression and a lot of the sad and troubling thoughts came from in my life, that I thought were me. A lot of the feelings of worthlessness that say you're not good enough. I think those come from that spirit, that negative, dark spirit.
I know you spoke about near-death experiences earlier with your mention of being able to see auras. Were there any other after effects you came back with that were unusual to you prior to your near-death experience?
It's like anything that was there before, psychically or spiritually, went 100-fold. So like before, there was like occasionally, like once I had seen a little bit of an aura and on myself when I was doing a self-portrait, and afterwards it was more like there were like lights everywhere. And some of that was, you know, if, like, I guess like it's like a little bit different. Like people talk about how, like, you know, drug use or LSD can, like, psychedelics can have these like spiritual effects, and that's more just like turning on a radio when you're not tuning it to a station, and you just get a lot of static. So that's not the same. And then it's like, because it's like clouded by all of these neurological things that are going on. And that's very different than what I see after the NDE, like in terms of NDE's after effects. It's like, it looks different than if you just like were at a party and took acid or whatever. It's like, if you do drugs, it's like you see this like almost living cartoon in front of your eyes with your eyes. Whereas when you're seeing the auras, it's more like something that gets stronger the more you fast, and the more that you abstain from certain worldly things, like to TV. Like the more I abstain, I fasted from TV for 1 Lent, and just like I cut my YouTube, my Netflix, all of that, all the way down to just like an hour or so of like the Yahoo Finance, and then just religious stuff and spiritual stuff like near-death experiences and sermons from some of the preachers that I think that seem to be following the same voice that I am. And you notice in their YouTube comments, they're also getting called of the devil, and they're also getting persecuted by the churches. So I guess that like getting thrown out of church is a sign that you're on the right path. Especially if you're getting thrown out for things like telling people to be nice to each other, help the homeless guy over there, you know, the one that smells like cigarettes and alcohol and looks like he hasn't showered in a month. He could probably use Jesus.
Yeah, well, religious dogma and division unfortunately seems as if it will always be around, regardless of what the truth is. With that said, speaking of religion, how has your religious views changed after your near-death experience?
Well, let's see. I was still into the pagan thing for a little while, but I started to like, once I integrated certain things, it was like, if you can imagine a car going down a highway at night at like 90 miles an hour, and all of a sudden the car sees this sign, and it's like, uh-oh, I've been going south. I should have been going north. And it's like, you have to, before you can even slam on the brakes, you have to first take your foot off the gas. And so, you know, I tried to just like keep going like I was going. I was like, nah, I didn't see that. But then it became clear that it did, because I was looking around and my friends, like, I had invited them over the next day. You know, they had left me. They had just bailed when I overdosed. They hadn't called the cops, taken me to a hospital or anything. So they were a little bit surprised to hear from a dead girl. And, you know, I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to drink today. I don't want to. And I was hungover and ate up, and, you know, all this other stuff, and the drugs are leaving my system, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. And so they're just like, well, then you don't care if I drink your beer for you. And they start drinking in front of me and laughing and pointing and saying, haha, you can't have any, haha. And I felt, because I was still having this like half out of this world sensation, and like I just didn't want to do what they were doing, and I felt like these bodily cravings that just weren't really a part of me, and I felt like God was showing me what it's like to die with strong attachment. And I started feeling such compassion for what I later found out that the Buddhists call hungry ghosts. That's their term for it, for somebody who just dies with, like, say, an addiction to alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or something, you know, they kind of like haunt around the person. And I felt like I was being shown their perspective as like a bit of a warning. But I wasn't willing to accept it at the time. So, you know, I just kept doing my self-destructive thing. And so then one day, you know, I started hanging out with a slightly different group of degenerate friends. And one of them I started dating, and we kind of got clean together. And that's when I started to get into a little bit more into Buddhism. I got out of dancing. My ex didn't want me to dance, so I got out of it. And that was probably good to listen to him on that. And then, like, I started studying yoga. Yoga is wonderful for pain management, by the way, but I will say this about yoga. Yoga is a yoking. Like, it's like if you think of yoking two oxen together, you know, like it's a joining of a spiritual body to a physical body.
I know throughout this interview, you've referenced the Bible a lot. Is it safe to say that you still hold on to some sort of version of the Christian gospel, but tie it more to your near-death experience rather than the organized religious version?
Yeah, I'm coming back around to it, is more accurate to say. I would say until probably a couple months ago, I would have called myself a Christian witch. And before that, I would have just called myself somewhere between a Buddhist and a witch. But I think that just this past month, especially as God's trying to show me the difference between miracles and magic, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just a Christian now. Does this mean I have to be a church lady? No? Okay, good. Because I'm not a church lady. I don't make a good church lady. I still have problems with church. I have probably been thrown out of more churches than most people have ever even thought about attending. Like, it seems to be a universal doctrine that there's something wrong with Liz. I don't know. Like, what I find very interesting at church, and when I started trying to go back and darken the doorstep of places that I never thought I would see again, one thing that was very interesting after my kid was born, and this is many years after my near-death experience, my family's still Mormon, and I tried to take him to a Mormon church. You know, it's just like, you know, just because it wasn't good for me and hurt me a lot, that doesn't any reason to deny him the truth. And I wasn't clicking that God had specifically told me in my near-death experience that the Mormon church was wrong. That just wasn't sinking in. And so I tried to take my baby there, and I got the voice that I heard in my near-death experience. And this time it was very stern, but still that loving, kind voice. So if you can imagine Morgan Freeman telling you to cut the crap, it was that kind of voice. And it said that if I took my son to the Mormon church, a thorn would be placed in his heart, just as it had been placed in mine.
So I guess the religious question can easily or easier be explained by referring to you as an experiential Christian. And that is a Christian who reads the Bible, who has her belief systems, but one who has experienced God versus one who has only believed or perceived God based on your near-death experience.
Yeah, I guess that's accurate. It's like I could not continue to be an honest witch if I did not at some point admit that Jesus was the Christ.
Yeah, very fascinating. And Elizabeth, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely powerful account.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm going to use that term, experiential Christian. That blew my mind. Thank you so much for interviewing me today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth Crosby.